Hi, this is Mr. Fernandez with a quick reflection on the short answer question that you just answered. The learning target for this hopefully 5-minute video or so is that you can answer an AP style short answer question effectively. More specifically, you'll hopefully know how to answer the question that you just got asked to respond to. So this is the first part of the short answer question that you just answered. It is typical of the short answer question on the AP exam for them to have at least one that has one or two quotes from either historical records, so primary sources, or secondary sources to compare and contrast. Here's two primary sources, a text by John Adams and a text by Benjamin Rush, both revolutionaries from the 1780s who were part of the revolutionary movement. And here are the three questions. Typically, they'll ask you to do something like compare and contrast the content of the quote, and then provide historical evidence to support one or both of the quotes. And that's what they're doing here. So this is a, down here, an interpretation question. Whatchamacallit? Interpreting, relevant historical evidence. So let's look at the first question. Briefly describe one significant difference between Adams's understanding and Rush's understanding of the American Revolution. So like I say in that early video, start by, in the video that introduces short answer questions and reviews how to answer them, you start by rephrasing the question, one significant difference between Adams and Rush's understanding of the American Revolution is, and then answering it, the timing of the revolution, and then provide a little bit of detail. Adams felt that the revolution took place before the fighting even began, etc., etc. Rush, on the other hand, argued that the revolution didn't truly occur. So notice how in this section here, this little phrase kind of briefly answers the question, and then these two sentences provides a detail about each of the two sources. If you did something like this, give yourself a point for the first question. You can pause the video and come back when you're done rereading your own. So, as you can see, basically what you've done is you've made two claims, or you have identified two claims. You're not making the claims. John Adams is making the first claim, and Benjamin Rush is making the second claim. But the next two questions you can answer by treating these two, the difference here, the statement of why these two things are different, as claims, separate claims. So here's B. Briefly explain how one specific historical event or development could be used to support Adams's interpretation. So the claim that Adams made was that the revolution took place before the fighting even began, as Americans united in resisting British power. What you're trying to do is support that claim, one specific historical event, and explain how it can be used to support Adams's interpretation. In code, basically, what they're asking you to do is to make a claim, that's John Adams's claim, and then provide evidence, specific evidence to support that claim, and then explain how that evidence supports the claim. So claim, evidence, reasoning. Okay, so let's look at an example. Response. Oops. One specific historical event that can be used to support Adams's interpretation is the Stamp Act Congress. The Stamp Act Congress was, so this is where I describe the Stamp Act Congress. I say a little bit about the Stamp Act Congress, but notice how this is a specific piece of information, of historical information that can be used to support Adams's claim that the revolution started before the fighting began. But notice how this has to end with details providing that elaborates on what the Stamp Act Congress was. You can't just say the Stamp Act Congress and move on. You have to provide that information. So here I continue with that. The Stamp Act Congress was a meeting of leaders in a number of colonies, blah, blah, blah. It led to a set of resolutions, so 2 sentences, although it can be one, that provides some details. And then here is my reasoning. This is what they want you to do when they ask you to explain how one piece of evidence can support the claim. Notice if they didn't want you to provide reasoning, they would have asked you something like, identify a piece of evidence that can be used to support the claim. In which case, they never will do this, but in which case you could see how you might be okay to just describe the evidence. But they want you to explain how it can be used to support. Well, it requires the blue part, the reasoning part. And that's what I do here. Go ahead and take a second to read that. So, pause the video in a second and ask yourself, did you do this in part B? Did you provide a specific piece of historical evidence? Did you describe it in some detail and then provide some some reasoning that explains how the evidence supports the claim? If you did, give yourself a point for the second prompt for B. If you didn't, then don't give yourself that point. And, oops. Oh, sorry. Anyway, for C, it's the same thing, only instead of Adams, you're supporting Rush's interpretation. But it should look like this. You should have a quick answer to the question for C that identifies the piece of information, the piece of evidence, a description of that piece of evidence, and then a clear explanation of how that piece of evidence supports the claim. If you did that for C, then give yourself the point. If you didn't do all of this for C, then don't give yourself the point. By the way, if you're looking for evidence, the study guide will have tons and tons of key terms that you'll be able to use for evidence. So look for the the relevant section of the Unit 2 study guide for examples of things that you could have used in the evidence part here for B and C. All right, guys. Thank you, and let me know if you have any questions by emailing me or asking me during class. Thanks and goodbye.